Hey, sorry about my hair. It's really windy in Edinburgh today. Welcome to Scotland, everybody. My name is Paul, and I am a tour guide with Invisible Cities in Edinburgh. We are a social enterprise who train people affected by homelessness to become tour guides. How amazing is that? We also help set up a couple of projects around Edinburgh that helps homeless people as well. One is a street barber, and one we'll actually visit on the way down the Royal Mile. So you can see directly where the fees are going. All the money has to get reinvested because we're a social enterprise, we're not for profit. So thank you very much for choosing us to host your wonderful tour of Edinburgh. My name is Paul. Just to let you see, there is a human on the end of the camera. I'm just going to switch the camera around and show you the #1 visitor attraction in Scotland and the second highest paid visitor attraction in Britain. 1 second, if I can just get my camera up. Oh, 1 second. There we go. Can anything be done about the echo? Somebody must have their speakers on or something, is there? I'm not getting an echo. Is anybody else, Laird? Do you know?
Well, there doesn't seem to be an echo coming through. If you want to double check speakers volume, just to adjust it to what suits. If anyone's having any major technical difficulties, please do use the live support back in the conference portal, and our colleagues will be able to help there.
All right, okay, no problem. Thanks very much for that, Laird. Hi there. It just seems to be a local problem, that, so try refreshing, and there's other suggestions in the chat there as well. This is Edinburgh Castle. This is the most seized upon castle in the whole of Europe. It has been seized upon about 24 times, mostly by the English. And if you look at the front of the castle here, this inside the building, and inside this castle is Edinburgh's oldest building. Up here is a little chapel. It's nearly 900 years old. It's called the St. Margaret Chapel. St. Margaret was a Scottish queen, and she is Scotland's only royal saint. And that was built in 1130. And if you look at the two statues here, so you see the guy on the left here, sorry for the finger, that's one of our most famous kings, Robert the Bruce. And in 1296, the English had control of the castle, believe it or not. The English had control of the castle in 1296. They stole the Stone of Destiny and the crown jewels of Scotland. We did not get the crown jewels back, and it took us 700 years to get the Stone of Destiny back. And so what happened was in 1314, Robert the Bruce, the king here, defeated the English in Bannockburn, and he sent back a party of 30 men to take the castle. 30 men. How could 30 men possibly take back the castle? I'm hearing you asking. Because amongst the party of the 30 men was a young man who used to live inside the castle, and he used to sneak out to see his girlfriend in the old town of Edinburgh, and he knew a secret way in. So under the cover of darkness, 30 men scaled up the rock and took back the castle, and Robert the Bruce ordered them to destroy Edinburgh Castle. That's right, Robert the Bruce. Sorry about the wind, guys, it's a bit windy here. You see how, sorry about the wind, I'll just try to show you hopefully it's not too bad. You see how it's sitting on the volcanic rock there? This was a gully here, this is man-made now, and over on this side they flooded it with water to make a lock, to make it even more difficult to break into. But Robert the Bruce was a very religious person, so he did not destroy the chapel dedicated to St. Margaret. So the chapel was left, and that is now the oldest building in Edinburgh. How amazing is that? It's about £19 to get into the castle. Most of what you can see at the front is actually Victorian, it's not that old, but there is, this part here is called the Half Moon Battery. That dates back to 1570. And every day at 1 o'clock, there is a time signal known as the 1 o'clock gun. And that goes off every day at 1 o'clock, surprisingly. But it doesn't go off on a Sunday. Good Friday or Christmas Day. And no, it's not because the Scots were too tight that they didn't have the 12 o'clock gun to save the cannonballs. And if you look here, you see how it's built on I showed you the volcanic rock. If you look at the mountain over here, this is actually an extinct volcano. I'll move out the way of the wind. This is an extinct volcano called Arthur Seat. And can you believe this? England and Scotland were not only one separate countries, England and Scotland were actually in separate continents at one point as well. Scotland, believe it or not, was actually attached to the equator when the volcano erupted. And then we moved around and smashed into England. We were connected to the mainland of Europe until 8,000 years ago, and a tsunami cut us off. So I'm just trying to get out the wind for you. Yes, I'll just let you know, everybody, in case you don't know, Scotland is the windiest country in the whole of Europe. Last year, 97% of our energy came from renewables. So how cool is that? Yeah, so this is an extinct volcano. It erupted 340 million years ago, and Edinburgh is built on 7 hills. This is one of them. This is called Castle Hill, and they're all volcanic. All the hills are volcanic. You see over there as well, they've got Pentlands as well. I'm just going to show you this. This is the Old Town area. Edinburgh is split into 2 main areas. This is the Old Town area, where I am standing now. And I'll just show you this building. You see this building here? This is a school. Sorry about I'm just trying to keep out the way of the wind. This is a school called George Heriot's, and some people believe it's the inspiration for Hogwarts from Harry Potter. You know Hogwarts from Harry Potter? It's not, but that's where Joanne Rowland's children went to school. It's a private school. How amazing. £20,000 a year in Edinburgh. 20% of school children live in poverty, but over 20% go to private school. How crazy is that? It's just a stick. So I'm just going to show you a little bit. This is the Old Town area, where the castle sits at the top. You see the castle at the top there? No wind in my living room, lucky for you. I'll just zoom this out again. Yeah, it is quite windy. You see the statue here in Edinburgh. Ladies, this is really, I do tours about females of Edinburgh. And you know, ladies, there are only 3 statues of females in Edinburgh. There are more statues of animals than ladies. So look at this man. This is the Duke of York. Do you know the nursery rhyme, the grand old Duke of York? He had 10,000 men. He marched them up to the top of the hill and he marched them down again. That's him. What they don't tell you anywhere is he recruited 5,000 black slaves to the British Army. This man here recruited 5,000 black slaves to the British Army, and it doesn't tell you that anywhere on his plaque. I wonder why. So I can think of a lot more ladies deserving of a statue compared to him. And he never even visited Edinburgh once. He's got a statue in 3 streets named after him. You see this beautiful building here? This is called Ramsay Gardens. It's only 19th century. There was an older building there, but it had to get demolished. And this is named after a poet called Alan Ramsay. And if you come to Edinburgh, you could actually stay here. Some of the houses are on Airbnb. And look at this, we're just going to look down the Royal Mile now. It's called the Royal Mile because of the castle sitting at the top. And at the bottom of the Royal Mile is the palace, where the Queen comes to stay in June. It's called the Palace of Holyrood. And there is an ancient ruined abbey behind it, dating back to the 11th century. Well, see how busy it is today? It's really busy this week because the English school holidays are on holiday. So the English are Scotland's most, 75% of our tourism comes from British people. Sorry, bud. See, I'm just going to show you this here. I remember I spoke to you about the Stone of Destiny. This is the Stone of Destiny. So this is an ancient stone that the kings and queens of Scotland had to sit upon to become crowned king or queen. So the English stole it for 700 years. When Prince Charles or William becomes king, they will have to take the stone down to Westminster. So Prince Charles or William will sit on it to become King or Queen of Scotland. So hopefully they won't steal it for another 700 years. And there's Mary, Queen of Scots, who got her head chopped off by her cousin, Queen Elizabeth of England. Quite a nice long neck she has too, isn't it? And there's the crown jewels. We got the English stole the crown jewels. We didn't get them back, so we had to make new ones. But even though they are the new ones, they are actually Europe's oldest crown jewels. Oh, and there's the 1 o'clock gun, look. And don't worry, it's not pointing towards England. By the way, Elaine, you might not believe me, but I am actually English. Despite my Scottish accent, there's Queen Margaret. Look, I am actually English. And look at the unicorn. Scotland is a nation of hairy-bummed Scottish warriors. William Wallace, King Robert the Bruce, and so on. And yet our national animal is a unicorn. How can a nation of hairy, bummed, Scottish, kilted warriors have a unicorn as the national animal? Well, it's because Scotland used to hunt whales, unfortunately. And one of the whales was called a narwhal whale. And the narwhal whale has a tooth or a tusk that looks quite similar to a unicorn's horn. So the sailors used to cut the horns off the whales and bring them back to Scotland and tell people they were from a far off land and the creature was a unicorn. And the kings and queens, they bought the unicorn's horns because unicorn's horn purifies poisonous food or liquid. And obviously people were always trying to poison the kings and queens. So eventually, around about 700 years ago, it was adopted as the national animal of Scotland. And I'll show you a picture later on. You'll see when England and Scotland joined up as the crowns, Mary, Queen of Scots' son, King James VI of Scotland, took over the crown of England when Elizabeth I died in 1603. And the lion is the national animal of England, and the lion and the unicorn are sworn enemies. And so you'll see a picture of the unicorn tied up in chains. The unicorn always has to be tied up in chains. And people did think that that was England trying to keep Scotland chained up, but it's nothing to do with that. It's because a unicorn can only be tamed by a virgin. It's untamed. It can only be controlled by a virgin. Do we have any virgins watching today? Maybe you can come to Scotland and tame the unicorn. You see this church here? This is called St. Columba's. St. Columba's, he was an Irish monk who helped to bring Christianity to Scotland. But inside the church is an event that's set up by Invisible Cities. And basically what it is a pamper evening just for homeless ladies. So the homeless ladies go in and they get spoiled for an evening. They get professional makeup and hairdressers, bra fitting, they get clothes to choose from, they get fed. How cool is that? Why shouldn't homeless ladies get pampered every so often? So that's where some of the money goes that has to get reinvested into the business because it's not for profit. So I'm just going to take you down to show you this little street here. Some people believe this is the street, the inspiration for Diagon Alley from Harry Potter. Look at this here. I'm just going to tell you a funny little story here. See this shop down here? This is a Harry Potter shop there. That's a Harry Potter shop, okay? And it's a street called Victoria Street, named after Queen Victoria. And before the pandemic, if you typed into Google Maps, Diagon Alley, it took you to that Harry Potter shop. But I think they were closed for about 12 months, so they must have stopped paying the bill to Google Maps. So no longer is that Diagon Alley on Google Maps. Diagon Alley takes you to Twickenham in London. And look at this, it's a closer view. So I'm trying to stay out of the wind. This is a closer view of the Hogwarts. Yeah. You can tell why people think it's Hogwarts with all the turrets. It has got a house system and so on, but most schools in Scotland have got a house system. It's a private school for private kids. You have to pay £20,000 a year to go there. Look at this street. Look at this beautiful little street. Sorry about the construction. So there's a shop called Ollivander's down here. It's another Harry Potter shop. And I reckon that could be the inspiration for Ollivander's. Joanne Rowland still lives in Edinburgh. We get massive Harry Potter tour groups coming around. We'll probably see them today. But a lovely little street, isn't it? Named after Queen Victoria, who was in fact the world's largest ever drugs trafficker. Queen Victoria sold more drugs than Pablo Escobar. They don't tell you this stuff at school. You have to come on an Invisible Cities tour to find out this kind of information, because being a tour guide comes with great responsibility, and it's my responsibility to seek out the truth and to find things out about society and so on that people don't know or has been hidden from us. So I like to find out and seek out the truth behind the myths and legends as well, because there are so many myths and legends in Edinburgh and Scotland and beyond. Obviously, we've got the Loch Ness Monster here. You know Nessie, the Loch Ness Monster. I actually believe in Nessie. No bagpipers today. We might see a bagpiper somewhere. So this is back onto the Royal Mile, the historic Royal Mile. And guess what? The Scots like to be different from the English. So our mile, this Royal Mile, is slightly longer than an English mile, by just over 100 yards. Typical of the Scots. It was also the Scots that drove on the left. We drive on the left in Britain. And it was actually the Scots that began driving on the left first. And that's because you have to keep your right hand free for your sword. Scotland was a very violent country. You look at this building here. This is called Gladstone's Land. Yeah, high up it is. This is, there's been a shop there since 1501, so over 500 years, but the building itself is 1550. So 470 years old. Quite a nice building. It's actually got a museum inside it, which you can go and see. Now you see these little lanes off the Royal Mile, you'll see all these little lanes, and they're called closes. Closes. And that is because Edinburgh was a fully enclosed city. For 250 years, Edinburgh was only 0.2 square miles. Because what happened was, in 1513, the Scots invaded England on behalf of the French. And up to 10,000 Scots were killed, including the Scottish king. So the Scots built a wall around Edinburgh, 0.2 square miles. And this is a little courtyard. This has been, most of the old town was demolished at the end of the 19th century, but they've recreated some of the buildings quite nicely. You see the steps going up here. What they used to do was, Edinburgh was the site of the world's first security system, believe it or not. It's a very basic security system. What they do, all the steps going up would be the same height, but the very last step would be twice the height of the other steps, or bigger. And so a stranger would fall and stumble on the top step, alerting the homeowners that somebody strange was in there trying to get into their house. So sorry if you heard a bit of wind noise there. Excuse me a second. So the word close comes from enclosed. Because Edinburgh was enclosed, they had to, at first, this is in 1513, and at first there was quite a lot of room. There was quite a lot of land to grow crops and animals. But then, because it was a walled city, more and more people would move here because it was safe, and it quickly became overcrowded. And so they had to start building up high as they could. So believe it or not, in the 16th century, Edinburgh built houses that were 130 feet high, 14 stories. The world's first high-rise flats were built in Edinburgh in the 16th century. How amazing is that? Because there were so many people here. Up to 60,000 people, because what happened was, in 1767, the rich moved out into the new town of Edinburgh. The rich moved out, leaving the poor people behind. And then in Ireland, they had a so-called famine, and thousands of Irish people fled Ireland and came to Britain, and they started coming to Edinburgh. And they moved in to the slums that were left behind. And then we know about the Highland clearances as well. The Scottish Highlanders were kicked off their land by the landowners to make way for sheep. And so all the Highlanders started to come to Edinburgh as well. And it quickly became stinking, filthy conditions. No sanitation or running water for quite a long time. And so most of the old town was knocked down and rebuilt. But you see here, you see these brass plaques on the ground. Look at that. That was actually the site of the last public execution in Edinburgh. They used to publicly execute people. And the last one was in the 21st of June, 1864. Up to 40,000 people would turn up. George Bryce, who was a murderer, was the last person who was publicly executed. They did not stop executing people, they just stopped executing them publicly. They would just take them inside the prison. There was too much drunken behaviour and so on as well. Look at this. This is a cathedral that is not a cathedral. In Scotland, prior to 1560, Scotland was a Roman Catholic country. And then in 1560, the Protestant Reformation happened. And Scotland became, the Scottish Protestants were Presbyterian, which is quite a strict form of Protestants. And they don't have bishops. They don't have bishops. And a cathedral has to have bishops. But the reason they've kept it is because this used to be a Catholic church. It's now a Protestant church, but it was also a collegiate church as well. So that's why they still call it a cathedral. It's a beautiful church. If you ever come to Edinburgh, have a look inside it. It's really nice. But if you see here, you see this Heart of Midlothian. You see this badge. This is called the Heart of Midlothian here. And people actually spit in it. It's the only place in Edinburgh where it is socially acceptable to spit upon. And this used to be where the prison is. I don't know if you can see here, there's brass plaques on the floor. Just going to show you again. See, there's brass plaques going up. I'm actually standing where a prison was. So I'm actually standing where the prison would have been before it was knocked down. And this is where the condemned prisoners were kept. If you were going to get executed, this is where you came out of. The door was here. So the crowds would line up and they would spit upon the prisoners as they were about to be executed. Some people would also spit on the door of the prison because of the conditions were so bad. And also, it was the place where you had to pay tax. So people did not like to pay tax. So even when the prison got knocked down, they kept the Heart of Midlothian. It's named after a book by Sir Walter Scott. And in Edinburgh, there is 2 football teams, 2 soccer teams. One is called Hibernian, and they were formed by the Irish immigrants who came to Edinburgh in the 19th century. Another soccer team is called Heart of Midlothian, and that is their club badge. So people who support Hibernian might spit in it for different reasons. But there is no plaque. There's no plaque on it. People drag their children into it and take selfies. They don't know what it's for. I think there should be some kind of warning. People think it's the geographical centre of Edinburgh because it's the Heart of Midlothian. The Edinburgh region is called Midlothian, like the county. So some people think it's the geographical centre, but it's not. But I think there should be a warning or something telling people. I've seen a guy lying down in it taking a selfie. A guy laid down in it a few months ago and took a selfie. You see the unicorn on top. It's quite dark. It's going to rain. You see the unicorn sitting on top of the market. This is called a Mercat Cross. Mercat Cross. They used to carry out punishments here, read out proclamations. They still do. See, there's a unicorn in chains. Can you see it? I'll see if I can get on that for you. 1 second, I'll zoom in. You see how the unicorn's got chains next to the lion? That's what I'm saying. It's nothing to do with Scotland being chained in. Just get that back. Just got to show you the statue of another man. This used to be the Parliament Square. This used to be the Parliament of Scotland. Where the Parliament's now at the bottom of the Royal Mile. You see this guy here, this chap? Can you see him? This is a chap called James Braidwood. And he set up the world's first municipal fire brigade here in Edinburgh in 1820. And then he went down to London to set up the London Fire Brigade. Unfortunately, he got killed in a fire. You see here, this is the city chambers. This is like the headquarters of the local council. Quite a nice building. I'm just going to show you some of these hands. We've got like a walk of fame here in Edinburgh. It's called the Edinburgh Awards. It's like the Hollywood Walk of Fame. And basically it is an award for people who have done something really good for Edinburgh. And the first person who won it was a guy called Ian Rankin. And he is a famous author, Rebus and all that. But look here, I'll show you if you can see it. The second person who won it was Joanne Rowland. Joanne Rowland was the second person who won it in 2008. There's only about 4 females, I think, that have won it. As usual, it's all men. Oops, sorry, I just caught the camera there. And there's Chris Hoy, remember the Olympic cyclist? He got 5 gold medals for going round in a circle on a bike. Obviously, he'd done more of that. I'm just having a laugh. And George Kerr, you don't want to mess with him. Look at the size of his hands. He was a 9th Dan judo master. He introduced judo, the Japanese martial art, to Scotland. And there's Ian Rankin's hands over there. So that's the Edinburgh Walk of Fame. And here's another statue of a man. Lots of statues of men. This is Alexander the Great. Yeah, it's a statue. Quite a nice building, isn't it? You can actually stay in here now. We've got accommodation in here now, in here. So if you come to Edinburgh, you can stay in here. I'm just going to show you this. Does anybody recognise this number here? Watch this. Annie Lennox, she won the Walk of Fame as well. Look at this number here. Does anybody recognise this number? 46664. 27 years in captivity. Are you so blind that you cannot see? Nelson Mandela. That was his prisoner number. That was his prisoner number. He visited Edinburgh in 1993. He was given the freedom of Glasgow, and a square was named after him whilst he was in prison. And that kept the spirits of the prisoners going. Adam Smith, he was known as the world's first economist. Look at the cathedral there, the unicorn. Quite nice, isn't it? Quite nice. Well done if you got that correct. That's us back onto the Royal Mile. So we're just going to continue back, walking down the Royal Mile. If you come to Edinburgh in August, Edinburgh hosts the world's largest arts festival in August. The population of Edinburgh is 550,000 or thereabouts. But in August, the population doubles to 1 million. Edinburgh is 100 square miles. It is the same size as the Maldives. So it's went from being 0.2 square miles in 1767 to now being 100 square miles. And this is where all the street performers come in August. Look up here. I'm just going to show you this plaque, because look how high up it is. You would not know it was there. You know. Now look, I'll zoom in for you. Okay. If you can see it. She's actually a doctor. Her name is Dr. Elsie Ingalls, and she was born in 1864 in India. Britain colonised 25% of the world during Queen Victoria's reign, including India. And she wanted to become a doctor. But in the 19th century, it was only men that were allowed to become doctors. But what happened was there was 7 ladies called the Edinburgh Seven, and they went to study medicine for the first time at Edinburgh University. And the men rebelled against it. To Edinburgh University's eternal shame, they did not give them their degrees until 150 years later. How disgraceful was that? The way they done it was quite nice. They got 7 girls who were doing the same course today. It's about 3 years ago now. They got 7 girls from Edinburgh Uni, and they went up to receive their degrees posthumously. But why did it take 150 years? And one of the girls was called Sophia Jex Blake. Lovely, this is Coburn Street. She was called Sophia Jex Blake, and she set up, for the first time, the Edinburgh School of Medicine for Ladies. And Elsie Ingalls went to that school, but she fell out with Sophia Jex Blake because Sophia Jex Blake was a strict disciplinarian. So she fell out, and she had to set up her own Edinburgh School of Medicine. She qualified to become a doctor. She went down to London to work in a maternity hospital, and she went across to Dublin as well. And she was so horrified by the conditions in the maternity hospital, she came back to Edinburgh. There was only men that were working in them. So when she came back to Edinburgh, she set up a training centre to train ladies to become midwives for the first time. She became a practicing doctor, and she used to treat the rich and the poor people all the same. If the poor people had no money, she would just treat them for free. And then she was also a suffragist. She wanted to get the females the vote. And World War I broke out in 1914. And she went to the War Office in Edinburgh Castle, and she told them that she should set up military hospitals to be run by females because their men are at war. The War Office told her to go home and stay silent. But she didn't. Elsie Inglis was a suffragist. She did not stay silent. She phoned up the governments of France, and the French took her up on her word and sent her to Siberia to set up the world's first military hospitals run by ladies. Unfortunately, she was kidnapped by the Germans and kept as a prisoner of war for a year. She was suffering from cancer, and they let her go after 1 year. And she came back to Edinburgh, to England, but unfortunately she died the day after she returned. But she's a local legend. Look at these are vaults. When the rich moved out, Edinburgh was lots of hills on it. So they made five bridges at the end of the 19th century, and they made arches underneath them. And they used to have shops inside them. But when it came to the winter time, they realised the arches underneath the bridges were not waterproof. So the shopkeepers moved out, and that's when the poor people moved in. The poor Irish immigrants and the Highlanders fleeing the Highland clearances. They used to live in these stinking conditions. Can you imagine what it was like? Sewage floating down the street, dead animals, and so on. It was one of the worst cities in Europe, Edinburgh, until the rich moved out to the new town. And that led to a period called the Enlightenment period, where Edinburgh invented the modern world. Scotland invented the television, the telephone, penicillin, the first economical steam engine, the electric toaster, the BBC, the Bank of England, radar, the kaleidoscope, and so on. I could go on, but you'll just be bored. But basically, Edinburgh invented the modern world. Unfortunately, a lot of this was funded by slavery, because when Scotland and England joined to create Britain in 1707, Scotland were given access to the colonies of England. And so Scotland profited as much from slavery as the English did, including the First Minister's house. The First Minister of Scotland just now is Nicola Sturgeon, and her house, her official residence, was unfortunately built on the proceeds of slavery. You see this bridge here? This bridge was built at the end of the 18th century to link. That's the new town down there. See the new town? In fact, I know what to do. In fact, I'll just show you this quickly, actually. What I'm going to do, I'm going to show you a bit of the new town, actually, as soon as I'm here. Just quickly run over without getting killed. Yeah, this bridge was built at the end of the 18th century. Unfortunately, it collapsed, killing 5 people. So it was rebuilt. And obviously, at first, people were quite reluctant to cross the bridge, as you can imagine. The bridge was replaced again in the 19th century because they built a train station underneath it and they had to widen the bridge. It's called Waverley Station, the only train station in the world named after an author. Remember I spoke about Walter Scott, the author of Heart of Midlothian? Well, one of his other books was called Waverley. And the reason I'm taking you in here is he's actually got a monument called the Walter Scott Monument, and it's the second largest monument to an author anywhere in the world. It's called the Gothic Rocket. You have to pay £8 to climb 287 steps. It's there. Look at this. I'll zoom in on this for you. See the big pointy thing? Right there. That's the Walter Scott Monument. 287 steps. And you have to pay £8 for the privilege of doing so. The reason it's so dark is Edinburgh used to have lots of chimneys. Edinburgh, all the houses were heated by coal and chimneys. and as a consequence, a lot of the buildings are black. They did start to clean the buildings, but what they realised was it was causing more damage. And you see here, this is another Harry Potter story here. You see this hotel? This is where Harry Potter finished. This is where Harry Potter finished, was in this hotel. It's called the Balmoral Hotel. And she booked a little room, a little penthouse up the top somewhere. She stayed there for 6 months. It was £1,000 per night. Imagine that, £1,000 per night. She stayed there for 6 months. And when she left, she vandalised one of the busts. She wrote with a marker on the back of the head of the statue, J. Rowling finished right in the Deathly Hallows there. And it took the cleaner 4 months to get it, to find out it was there. 4 months. A 5-star hotel, £1,000 a night, and it took the cleaner 4 months. Somebody was asking about the views. Hang on 1 second, let's get this back out. Yeah, we're just going to, the way Edinburgh's split is, you'll find out when we go down. Basically, this tour is a little walk. We've only got an hour on this tour. So basically, it's a walk down the Royal Mile. But I will show you some of the hills in a second when I get round a bit. But yeah, it's just unfortunately the layout of Edinburgh. The new town and the old town are both UNESCO World Heritage Sites. Scotland has 6 UNESCO World Heritage Sites. You see the church over here? This is called the Tron. And the Tron means beam. A beam, you know, like a wooden beam. And one of the punishments they used to do was they used to nail your ear. If you got caught committing crime, one of the punishments was they would nail your ear to the wooden beam, and they would make you kneel on a stool. And then at 4 o'clock, they would come along and kick the stool away, and half your ear would be ripped off. And that's where the term earmarked came from. You know, earmarked? Your ear is marked. That's because your ear was half ripped off as a punishment. I'm just now going to show you 2 of Edinburgh's oldest buildings outside the castle. What happened was in 1821, there was a 3-day fire. The poor people who were left behind when the rich left couldn't afford to maintain the houses. So they fell into a state of disrepair. And a building collapsed in 1864, killing 35 people. So that was it. Most of the old town was then demolished and rebuilt. So some of the new town, the so-called new town, most of the new town, well, a lot of it, is older than the buildings in the old town, because the old town got demolished. Do you remember up on the castle where all the cars were parked in the ice cream van? Well, that's the foundations for that, with all the houses that were knocked down. See here. So Edinburgh, as I said earlier, remember I said there was a walled city? See here. So here, that gate, they had 6 of these gates around the city walls to allow access, but you had to pay tax to get back through. And it was quite unsafe outside the city walls. So most people never left for 250 years. How mad is that? Yep. I get all the useless information. It's going to get better, by the way. Wait till you hear my next story. You see here, this was a water system. In the 17th century, they put a big, massive water tank next to Edinburgh Castle, and it was a gravity. We're coming down the hill, you see. So it was gravity fed. So the handle was at the top, and the water would come out here. You know, look at that face. The water would come out of there, right? So most people were right-handed, so they would rest their left leg on there. So look how worn on this. You might not see it, but on this side it's really worn down. But on this side it's smooth. So more people were left right-handed than left. Incredible, isn't it? That was the first water supply. And if you look at the buildings, look how higgledy-piggledy they are. This was built in the 16th century, this house. These 2 houses are 16th century. This is called John Knox House. And this one is called Mowbray House. And if you look how higgledy-piggledy it is, do you remember the rich and the poor people had to live together, yeah? So you didn't want to live up the top because it was the risk of buildings were collapsing and going on fire. They used to keep animals up the top. And you wouldn't want to live in the bottom. Do you know why? Because they used to chuck the poo. Most families lived in one room and they would just do the toilet in a bucket. And then at 10 o'clock at night, they would chuck the poo out of the window. And they would shout, Gare de l'eau, which is French for get out the way of the water, although it wasn't water. So the rich people used to live in the middle. Yeah, the poor lived on the bottom, the rich lived in the middle, and that's where the term middle class originated. Don't the term middle class? Who are the middle classes? That's where it originated, because the rich lived in the middle. How cool is that? And if you were walking past, if you weren't quick enough to get out of the way, you could get covered in poo. Right? And so they used to shout, hold your hand until I get out of the way. Because if you weren't quick enough to get out of the way, this is what happened. You got... That's where this saying originated, because of all the poo that was chucked out of the window. If you weren't quick enough, boom, all over your face. Hope you like that story. Now you can tell all your friends. Are you having a good laugh? Give me a clap in hands if you're having a good laugh. If you're enjoying the tour, let me know. I like to have a laugh with my tours. You see here? See how the bar's called the World's End? Remember that gate I showed you? Well, this is they really thought this was the end of the world. Because this here, again, you see the plaques on the ground? You see the plaques? See there? And well, you can't see them, they're under here. This was the gate, this was the end of Edinburgh. So literally this was the end of the world. Because if you passed through that gate, to get back, you had to pay tax. And it was unsafe. So most people never left for 250 years. Can you imagine? No internet access, no running water, no electricity, no sanitation. 0.2 square miles is all they had. I just can't imagine it. So again, I'm just going to show you a little bit of the new town now. Somebody was asking about the landscape. Let me see a little bit of it over here. Is there anybody from America here? Where this is, I'm just going to show you. I'll zoom in a second. You see this? Get this. This is another volcanic hill here. This is called Colton Hill up here. See that? In fact, I'll go down a bit. Actually, I can show you a bit over there. Show you a bit. You see here? So you see the hill? I'll zoom in on this. You see the tall monument there? You see it? Can I zoom in? See the monument with the cross on it? Remember I spoke about the 1 o'clock gun, the time signal? Well, that came in 1861. From about 1820 onwards, this is called Nelson's Monument, built after the Napoleonic Wars, and it's based on an upturned telescope. And at the top is a cross, and just before 1 o'clock, there's a ball there. So the ball would rise up, and at exactly 1 o'clock, the ball would drop, so the sailors in the sea could set their chronometers. But the problem is, Edinburgh suffers from bad weather quite a lot. And half the time the sailors couldn't see. So that's why in 1861, they took a cable all the way. Oh, sorry, Matt. Sorry, they took a cable all the way from there to the castle. And that's why the 1 o'clock gun goes off again. You can see the bridge. You can see the train station here, Waverley. It's right in the centre. And that's again the bridge that I walked down to show you. See it connecting the old town to the new town. That's the old prison. Again, I'll zoom in for you. See that building there? That's the prison. That was the when they knocked down the prison, they moved it to here. But then in 1932, no problem. See you later. In 1932, most of the prison was knocked down and replaced by this building here. It's called St Andrew's House. But see the pointed needle? That's called Cleopatra's Needle, or the Martyrs' Monument. That is in a graveyard. But just next to that monument was the world's first statue of an American president outside America. There is a statue of Abraham Lincoln there. So if you come to Edinburgh, if you're American, just follow that needle and you'll see a statue of Abraham Lincoln. And it was basically put there to commemorate the Scottish soldiers who fought on both sides of the American Civil War and so on. It's quite a nice statue as well. It's quite lifelike. So we're just going to go back down to the Royal Mile now. We're going to visit a church, a little graveyard. Get back on the tour, it's quite busy today. It's started to rain, I might have to get my umbrella out in a second. It rains 191 days of the year in Edinburgh. Yeah. Man. 191 days it rains. It doesn't rain all day. But today's rain is tomorrow's whiskey. Scotland is famous for whiskey. So that's why we like to have lots of rain. And remember, when you come to Edinburgh, you need to wear all kinds of clothing. The weather can change from minute to minute. You can experience 4 seasons in one day. So just remember that. Always better to be prepared. Thanks if you're having to leave. Hasta luego. Auf Wiedersehen. Cheerio. Ciao. See you later. Thank you very much for staying on my tour. We've only got about another 15 minutes to go. We're nearly at the bottom of the Royal Mile. See some of the old buildings look old. A lot of them are being recreated. We're going to visit the Royal Church, where the Queen Elizabeth I of Scotland comes to Edinburgh in June, and she has a garden party, and she goes to church in this church we're going to visit next. It's known as the Royal Church of Edinburgh, and she only stays in Holyrood Palace for 1 week because she has a palace in the Highlands of Scotland called Balmoral, and that is where she spends about 4 months of the year. Queen Victoria was the first person to buy Balmoral Palace. She actually gave cocaine. Do you know the British Prime Minister during World War II, Winston Churchill? Well, Queen Victoria gave him cocaine in Balmoral Palace. Can you imagine the shock, the scandal? Queen Victoria gave cocaine to Winston Churchill? It was quite common with all the Victorians. Robert Louis Stevenson wrote Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde in the middle of a 6-day cocaine binge. Sherlock Holmes was the first person to mention speedballs. Sherlock Holmes said to Dr. Watson one day, "Shall we have cocaine or opium today, or shall we have them mixed together and have a speedball?" Sherlock Holmes, who would have known? Here we are, lovely little church coming up. We're just going to go into it. In fact, there's somebody with a Sherlock Holmes umbrella. I wonder if they know about his drug-taking habits. Get this church. Yeah, this is the Royal Church of Edinburgh. See at the top, there's a stag. Sorry, Pat. There's a stag up there. Ah, catching the cable. And they're actually real antlers up there. They have to replace them every couple of years. They weren't illegal back in the days. They were legal. The antlers have to get replaced every 2 years because of the bad weather in Edinburgh. So one of the royal family will go up to Balmoral and shoot a stag, cut off the antlers and bring it down here. And look at this tree. This was planted by the Queen. The Queen came with her mother. Remember the Queen Mother? I'll show you. She came in 1947 after the war. Look. Planted by Her Majesty the Queen Elizabeth on the 17th of July 1947. And the doors of this church are painted quite bright red, as you can see, and that was because of the Queen Mother. She came to the church in 1947 and the doors were painted black, and the Queen Mother asked the minister, "Can you please change the colours of the doors and make them a bright colour, please, because everyone's depressed after the war." So they painted the doors red, the colour of blood. And this is an ancient graveyard. And have you heard of the movie Ebenezer Scrooge? You know the Christmas Carol, Charles Dickens, Ebenezer Scrooge? Well, it was actually in this graveyard. Charles Dickens was attending a lecture here in Edinburgh. See the scenery again. And he was walking down around this graveyard. He came for a break at lunchtime. And he was walking around this graveyard. And he stumbled across a grave that read, Ebenezer Scroggie, mean man. Ebenezer Scroggie, mean man. And Charles Dickens thought to himself, wow, he must have been a really nasty character if they've went to the trouble of putting on his gravestone, mean man. So he created the character Ebenezer Scrooge. He changed Scroggie to Scrooge. He became Ebenezer Scrooge. However, Ebenezer Scroggie's real family were none too impressed with this because he wasn't a mean man. He was a meal man. And a meal man is a person who traded in corn and grain. He was actually a very nice man. His family were going to sue Charles Dickens, so Charles Dickens had to apologise to the family. So the next time you watch Ebenezer Scrooge, just remember, he was a really nice man. We can't visit his grave, unfortunately, because they've done some maintenance work, probably in the 1960s, and they've lost Ebenezer Scroggie's grave. They didn't know the historical value of it, so they just got rid of it. So we can't visit Ebenezer Scroggie's grave, Ebenezer Scrooge. But what a nice story. Isn't it? See this one, another statue of a man. This is a poet. Have you heard of our Scotland's national poet called Robert Burns? A Fond Kiss, A Red, Red Rose, Auld Lang Syne. Well, this is Robert Burns' favourite poet. He was a chap called Robert Ferguson. Unfortunately, he died destitute at only 24-year-old. But they reckon Robert Burns might have plagiarised some of his work. Robert Ferguson. Remember his name. So we're nearly finished, everybody. We're just going to walk down. I'm just going to show you the palace at the bottom and the Parliament. Scotland is not an independent country yet. We are still part of Britain. I don't know how much longer that will stay, because in 2014, Scotland had a referendum on independence, and the main argument on the no side was to stay in the European Union, you have to vote no. So 55% of the people living in Scotland voted no. And then we had a vote in 2016 to stay in the European Union, and Scotland voted 62% to stay in the European Union. Despite this, we got taken out by England. So the Scottish National Party are the government of Scotland, and they just won an election, and it's believed they have a mandate for another independence referendum. So they reckon in the next 2 or 3 years, we will have a referendum on Scottish independence. So we might not be part of Britain for much longer, because a lot of people want to go back into Europe. Edinburgh itself voted 74% to stay in Europe. Edinburgh is a European city. We've got probably about 10,000 Spanish, 5,000 French and German, probably about 20,000 Irish. We've got about 400,000 English. The last few years, historically, more people from Scotland would move to England than vice versa. But now it's been reversed. More English people are moving to Scotland than Scots moving to England. I've met quite a lot of them on my tour, and I think a lot of the young people from England are coming up to Scotland to vote for independence so they can get back into the European Union, because England has no route back into the EU. And they might want to study or work in one of the 27 countries in the EU. So watch this space. We all talk about history, don't we? But we're actually living through history at the same time as well. I'm just going to show you this little close down here. There's any Outlander fans? Look at this. It's called White Horse Close. Look at it. It's a 17th century. Quite nice. It's in Outlander 3. See these three? Got beautiful little houses. It's called White Horse Close. And some people tell you that it's called White Horse Close because it used to be where Mary Queen of Scots kept her white horse. But it's more likely to be named after a pub, a bar that was called the White Horse Inn. Quite nice, but isn't it? Quite quaint. 1623. Quite nice. But I'm conscious of the time, so I'm just going to quickly show you the palace and then finish the tour at the Parliament. I hope this has been a nice start to your day. Bit better than working, isn't it, I suppose? having to listen to me. I'm just going to cross the road. You see the window surrounds? You see the black window surrounds there? They're based on Elvis Presley's sideburns. I'm only kidding, man. They're actually supposed to be pulled back curtains. Pulled back curtains. It's been a fabulous start to the day. Oh, thank you very much. I like to have a good laugh, you know. Life's too short, isn't it? So it's all very well. We can all, a tour guide can tell you information about kings and queens and dates and all this and that. But you have to be entertaining as well, don't you? And I like to try and be entertaining. Some people do not always get it, however. That's individual choices. Oh, here we go. Here's a nice picture of a unicorn in chains. Like, see, this is before we joined up with England. The unicorn had chains then. It's nothing to do with England keeping Scotland in chains. I'm just going to show you this palace now. Look at this beautiful palace. Excuse the camera. There we go. The Palace of Holyrood. Quite nice. You see the building on the left behind it? That's the ruins of Holyrood Abbey, destroyed by the English in 1544 by King Henry VIII. And this is where the Queen comes. Beautiful. It's about £16 to go and see it. It's quite good. We've got beautiful grounds and gardens. You can actually spend the whole day there. If you're going to come to Edinburgh, I would take a picnic in there and go and do a tour, have a picnic, then I would go and do the tour again, because you know what it's like. You always forget stuff and you're paid for the day, so go and do it twice. Okay. Well, so I'm just going to, this is the Parliament building now, everybody. You see the Scottish Parliament? It's a very modern building. It was designed by a Catalonian architect, who actually died during the construction of it. But luckily his wife was an architect too. Morales was his name. So his wife finished it. It cost £400 million. And this is the home of Nicola Sturgeon, the First Minister. The most powerful person in Scotland is a female. And I'm very proud of this fact. Do you know what, everybody? Watch this. You see the bars? In fact, look at the bars on the window just before I tell you. See the bars? See how the windows have got bars? That's to keep the politicians in. But look at this, everyone. Oh, turn round. I let's try to turn the scale around. Sometimes it's temperamental. There we go. Hi, everyone. Look at this. Hey, girls. Scotland was the first country in the world to eradicate period poverty. This is a social enterprise called Hey Girls. Basically, in Britain, schoolgirls were skipping school because they could not afford sanitary products. Despite Britain being the 5th largest economy in the world, Britain is also the 5th most unequal country in the world. So schoolgirls were missing school because they couldn't afford sanitary products. So these two girls here, mother and daughter, they're from Scotland. They set up a company called Hey Girls. And so what they do is, for every person who buys one packet of these, they donate one packet free to a low-income family. How cool is that? Fantastic idea, isn't it? But they led a campaign a few years ago. They went to Nicola Sturgeon and says, Nicola Sturgeon, we need to eradicate period poverty for school children. So Nicola Sturgeon said yes. So Scotland was the first country in the world to give school children under 18s, anyone who needed them, access to sanitary products for free. But now they are going one step further. Scotland is the first country in the world again to eradicate period poverty for everyone. So everyone in Scotland from now on that needs them is going to get free sanitary products. How cool is that? That makes me very proud as an adopted Scot. How cool is that? So thank you very much, everybody. I hope you've enjoyed this tour today. I hope you've had a good laugh. I hope you've learned a few things. The middle class, the poo getting splashed on your face. If anybody has any questions, I don't know if I've missed, I don't see the chat very much, but yeah, if you want to ask any questions, if you want to unmute, you can ask any questions. If not, I'll just check the chat actually. There's been chat, 61 chats. Oh, thank you everyone. Oh, there we go. I'm doing it the wrong way. Thank you. Oh, lots of good comments, man. Thank you very much, everybody. I can't see them. Thank you very much for all the nice comments. If you can, I know everyone's quite busy these days, but the best way to help us as a social enterprise is to leave a review on TripAdvisor or somewhere like that. So if you can, spare a few minutes. If you can help us by leaving a review, that is the best way to help us, because we are a social enterprise. We have not got a massive marketing budget as such. So thank you very much, everybody. I'm just going to check the time. Yeah, 12:47. That's quite good timing, actually. I've got to go now. I'm going to do another tour down in Leith. I'm doing an in-person tour today. Oh, your kids, was it? I didn't know there was children watching. Sorry about that. Oh, sorry, man. Sorry for a mild swear word on halfway down the Royal Mile there. I didn't realise it was. I thought it was only adults watching. Hopefully they weren't offended by the poo story. Apologies for that. I didn't realise. Bad of me. But at least I never said any bad words. Well, not too bad, but thank you very much, everybody. It's quite a nice day now. The wind's kind of calmed down a little bit. So, Laird, are you happy for me to go?
That's lovely. Thank you very much, Paul. And as you can see from the comments, everybody's thoroughly enjoyed it. So thanks again from all of us on behalf of Gin 2021. Yes, go and enjoy your next tour, and thanks again.
Perfect, guys. Thank you so much, everybody. And thanks for the nice comments. It means a lot. Take care, everybody. See you soon.